We're continuing our Finding Your Voice series with my guest, Dr. Jerrica Dodd, on uncovering what's beneath your story on this episode of the Speaking Your Brand podcast. More and more women are making an impact by starting businesses, running for office, and speaking up for what matters. With my background as a TV political analyst, entrepreneur, and speaker, I interview and coach purpose-driven women to shape their brands, grow their companies, and become recognized as influencers in their field. This is Speaking Your Brand, your place to learn how to persuasively communicate your message to your audience. Hi there, and welcome to the Speaking Your Brand podcast. I'm your host, Carol Cox. We've been talking for the past couple of episodes about finding your voice and both the challenges and the opportunities around that. My guest today is Dr. Jerrica Dodd, a pharmacist who now coaches other women pharmacists who are transitioning into starting their own businesses. Jerrica is an incredible entrepreneur, coach, and speaker. We've worked together twice on her talks in the past few years, and she has such a dynamic personality and presence. In this episode, Jerrica and I talk about the key questions she asks her coaching clients. One that she finds is oftentimes difficult for us as women to answer, but that we need to get better at answering for ourselves. We also talk about asking yourself this question: if you could do anything, what would it be? And if you really ask yourself that and sit down and think about it, it could be very different from what you're doing now, or it could be exactly what you're doing now. I ended up asking Jerrica that, and she had a very surprising answer for me because of her unexpected journey into pharmacy from a love that she had of English and history. So you'll hear about that. You'll also hear our mutual love of diagramming sentences. And I wonder, do kids still diagram sentences when they're in school? Because I remember I love that. We also talk about how Jerrica found her voice by seeing what was at the core of her stories. So how can we excavate? How can we uncover? What are these universal values that keep showing up in your personal experiences and your stories that you can then take and then universalize for your audience? At the end, I asked Jerrica for recommendations that she would give to you listeners if you want to have more impact and more fulfillment. I hope you enjoyed this conversation as much as I did. Be sure to connect with me on LinkedIn as well as with Jerrica on LinkedIn. This is the platform that I use primarily. I keep track of Jerrica on LinkedIn as I do with many of our Speaking Your Brand clients and my friends and colleagues and many of you listeners. So connect with us there. If you would like to improve your LinkedIn strategy so that you have a profile that attracts speaking engagements and clients, and that you know how to leverage your connections and your content, I invite you to check out our LinkedIn for Speakers Masterclass. We get rave reviews about the training that my speaking coach, Diane Diaz, put together for that masterclass. It is fantastic. We just heard from someone who had newly signed up for it in the past couple of weeks. She went through the training videos the day that she purchased it and updated her profile. And not even a day later, she got a speaking request, a speaking invitation that came to her. So this really does work. You can get all the details on our masterclass and enroll in it by going to speakingyourbrand.com/LinkedIn. Again, that's speakingyourbrand.com/LinkedIn. Now, let's get on with the show. Welcome to the podcast, Jerrica.
Hi, Carol. Thank you.
I am so happy that you're here with us today. We first met in the fall of 2017. I can't believe that it will be almost 3 years now that we first worked together. And you have always come across to me as such a confident, poised woman. You are so successful in what you do. And we're going to talk today about this idea of finding your voice, how you have, but then also how you help the women pharmacists that you coach find their voices and really figure out what is it that they want to do next in their professional life, in their career. So Jerrica, I want to ask you first though, have you always been this confident, poised woman that I see before me now?
No, I would say no to that. I think that my confidence has come from trial and error along my journey. There have definitely been times in my life, Carol, where I have doubted myself. I've doubted my intelligence. I've doubted who I was as a professional. And But I will tell you that I've had some definite confidence builders in my life. And because oftentimes fear is what opposes our confidence. And you know that I had brain surgery 4 years ago. And I think that is a big factor as to why I'm not afraid of many things, because there's nothing like having surgery in the back of your head twice. I mean, most things that I've encountered since then just don't even parallel. So I think that's one of the things. And I've learned over time that I can put my faith and my trust and my hope in other people and hope that they would see and appreciate my value. However, I've decided that I trust God and I bet on me.
I love that, Jerrica. And I remember the very first time we worked together on your talk, you were presenting at a conference.
It was a women's conference that I spoke of. The board is right behind there.
I know. I actually, even though you live in Atlanta and I'm in Orlando, you wanted your board with all the post-it notes on it. So I actually shipped it to you, and I was so excited that you wanted it.
I still have it. I know the gist of what I talked about was how to respond when life doesn't go the way that you want it to. And I talked about some of the reasons we feel thrown off course, if you will, with life when it hasn't turned out. And I talked about how I dreamt that I was going to marry Michael Jackson and I was going to be a veterinarian, and that didn't happen. But I think that life has turned out amazing despite. And so that was the gist, if you will, the high level of what that talk was about from a spiritual perspective.
Well, you still have doctor in front of your name, except that you're a doctor of pharmacy instead of a doctor of veterinary medicine, just working on different species. That's all.
Right, definitely.
Well, and when you mentioned about putting your trust in other people and having other people see what you're capable of, see your potential, and that's what you're really doing now, Jerrica, by coaching women pharmacists who come to you and they're realizing that their existing careers that they have within pharmacy are not maybe what they want to do anymore. And so I'm sure that a part of it is helping them develop confidence in making a change. And sometimes you were talking to me before we even hit record. So you publish this beautiful magazine, and a lot of the women that you profile in your magazine are your clients, these women pharmacists, and some of them do pharmacy consulting as the pivot in their career, but some of them are doing things that are totally different than pharmacy. So tell me about some of them, and what are some of the obstacles that they are facing when they come to you?
So usually the obstacle that they're facing when they come, or that they think they're facing, because oftentimes the symptom of the problem isn't necessarily what the actual problem is. So when people come to me and they say, so you do business coaching or career coaching or what have you, and I'm like, yes. And they go, well, what about, do you do life coaching? And I say, yes. But usually when people find me, they're not looking for life coaching. They have a problem that they perceive. They want to build a business or pivot in their career, and that's the problem. And one of the things that happens is the life coaching just kind of seeps into filling in the cracks and the crevices, because I say that how you do anything is how you do everything. So if, for example, you procrastinate in your life, you're going to procrastinate in your business or procrastinate in that new career endeavor. And so then when people go, well, why isn't something happening? Then I say we need to go back and look at what's going on in life. Where is there something missing? What's the challenge there? And oftentimes they come, and I say this often, what do you want? And many women, I don't necessarily think it's germane to women pharmacists, just women in general. It's very difficult for them to articulate what they want. So I get all kinds of answers like, well, I don't like, and I hate, and I don't want, and this is no good. And then I let it go on for a second, and then I stop and go, yes, but I ask, what do you want? And to really just sit with yourself and go, well, what do I want? That, in my opinion, requires you to tap into your heart. Because when you're talking with intellectual, analytical pharmacists, the first place that many of them go is their head. And what you want, in my opinion, cannot be intellectualized. However, what's in your heart, which many people try to cover that up. I mean, I do Zoom calls so that I can see body language. And when I say, what do you want? They begin to shrink because it somewhere has been communicated that it's not okay for you to, share your dreams and talk about them because you're crazy, right? You're a pharmacist. What are you dreaming about that for? So that generally is where we have to start.
That's really powerful, Jerrica. And thinking about this idea of finding your voice, and for them asking that question, what do you want? And them having to tap into their heart sounds like that's one of maybe it's the first step to figure out what is their voice, what is it that they want to say, and in the sense of not necessarily say in public speaking, but what is it that they want to say in the creative outlet that will be their business next.
So one of the questions that I ask is, if you were not a pharmacist, what else would you be? And that's when it gives them the permission to dream. It gives them the permission to go, well, you know what? Maybe I would build the next spaceship for NASA or, whatever it is that they've thought about, but they've pushed it down and suppressed it and said, oh, I could never do that. What would my spouse think? What would my family think? What would the world think? What would my peers and colleagues at work think if I decided to follow my dream? And, Carol, I remember when Oprah used to be on the Oprah Winfrey Show. And, you would see those shows that she would do with people who just like woke up one day and they quit their job. And I don't advocate people do that necessarily. And I'd be responsible. But people would say, well, I used to be an investment banker, but now I have my own bakery. And I used to look at those shows and go, wow, that is so awesome. I wish that I had the nerve and the guts to do that. Well, I think that when you're starting to ask people what they want, in essence, I'm helping them to do that. I'm helping them to say, you know what, this isn't quite what I've dreamed about. I want to do something different, and I just don't know how to do it. And that may be within the profession of pharmacy, or it may not.
Jerrica, if I ask you, what would you be doing if you weren't doing pharmacy? And I have a feeling that you're probably doing it right now.
Yes, I feel like I've come full circle. When I was accepted into pharmacy school, so long ago, I wanted to be a high school English teacher. I wanted to have my students read novels and we would discuss them in class. And I wanted to help students diagram sentences. I don't even know if they diagram sentences anymore.
Oh my gosh, I loved diagramming sentences.
Yes.
Amazing. I don't know if they still do it in school or not. I hope they do because it was amazing.
I think I think it should be necessary. It should be required. I mean, maybe there's a way you can do it online, diagram the sentences online, but that was so much fun to me. And I know that sounds really nerdy, but that's what I wanted to be. I wanted to be a high school English teacher. And then I went on to pharmacy school.
Can I ask you why?
Because I received a full academic scholarship. And at 17, I at least had some knowledge. And I don't even know how, but I remember thinking teachers don't make any money. And that's a travesty. It was then and it still is now, because I think it's a very noble profession and they should be definitely paid more.
Absolutely.
But at 17, I said, teachers don't make any money. I have this full scholarship to go to school. I need to be able to take care of myself. So I literally flipped through the catalog. There was no internet. I flipped through the catalog and said, nursing, that means I have to touch the patient. I flipped again and said, physical therapy, no, they have to dissect animals. And then I flipped one last time and I figured that I needed to do something in the science field in order to be able to take care of myself. I flipped one more time, picked pharmacy, did not read the curriculum, closed the book and said, that's what I'll do. So if you can imagine wanting to be an English teacher, I love English and history. Can you imagine the boomerang my neck did every semester when there was a new chemistry class?
You had to take organic chemistry and all of that?
Yes, 1 and 2. There's organic, there's inorganic, there's medicinal chemistry, there's all kinds of chemistry. Yes. So if you can imagine, I was reeling like, who played this cruel joke with all this chemistry? I remember having physics and math and yes, all of that. But The thing that I'll say is that I'm very proud that I maintained the scholarship the entire time. So obviously, I had the skill to do those other subjects, though they weren't necessarily my favorite. But that's how I wish I had a better story for why I went to pharmacy school, but it was pretty haphazard at the age of 17 when I was making that decision.
Well, you obviously are very well rounded to be able to do so well in the math and science classes as having your first love be something like English and history instead. So you go to college, you go to pharmacy school, you get your degrees, you become a doctor of pharmacy, you go work in pharmacy. And I know you had a very busy career when you were working in pharmacy, and then you decide to create your own business, your Pharmacy Advocate, and you have a magazine, and now you're coaching women pharmacists. Tell me about when you're coaching the women. We touched briefly on this idea of helping them find their voice. And before we hit record, and I jotted this down, you said that what you feel like what you're helping them with is finding what their story is. That sometimes the story is underneath what the story looks like it is.
Right. So I had to learn to tell my story. And I have an amazing coach, and that is the centrality of the coaching that she gives. And I learned to tell my story because even when I met you in 2017, if you had said, well, what's your story? I would have said, oh, I had brain surgery. I probably did say it. And while that is a fact in the story, it's not the story. The story is that I did not prioritize myself. I did not put me first. And so, like many women, whether you're married or not, we put our spouses, our children, our parents, our jobs, our businesses, we put our civic responsibilities, you name it. There are all kinds of things that can go in that space. And I say to women that we end up being on the back burner. And then most of us, we go from the back burner to behind the stove where the dust is. And then it makes us resentful. It makes us look for validation in other people because so whenever, and that was my story. Whenever I get on the phone with a woman who says, I just want to help people. That's just all I want to do. I just want to help people. That to me is code for I need someone to pour into me. I need to learn how to pour into myself, because what happens is we feel like we should give more. If I give more, then they'll see how valuable I am. Then they'll appreciate how much I'm doing. And it doesn't happen. It does not happen. And so when you stop, when I learned, and my first brick wall experience was when I sat in the neurosurgeon's office after 13 years of chasing symptoms. I sat in the neurosurgeon's office and he said, you need brain surgery. My first response was literally, I had an attitude. And I remember coming home talking to one of my pharmacist colleagues and saying, I don't like his attitude. And she was like, look, we need him to do brain surgery, not be your best friend. I was like, you're absolutely right. Like I had to have a reality check. But when I was in his office and he said that I needed surgery, I said, well, what happens if I don't do it? And he says, well, you'll be paralyzed. I mean, he was very matter of fact, like, listen, lady, I'm not going to play with you. You will be paralyzed. And I thought that I was talking with him about what my options were. And the reason why was because I did not prioritize me. I was sitting and in my mind was racing. My father has cancer. My mother has had triple bypass surgery, came out of that surgery with a dementia. And you're telling me that I need to have I need to sit down, let everybody else serve me and take care of me for a change. And I just got a new job. You don't mean that I need to take care of myself, do you? And so he literally stood there and I said, how long do I have? He said, Miss Dodd, I don't have a crystal ball and I can't tell you how long you've had. You've made it an awfully long time, but I can't tell you. Basically, I was asking, how long do I have before I'm paralyzed? Because if he had said, you'll be paralyzed on the 5th of April, I would have said, okay, let's schedule that for the 4th of April. because that's how long I was willing to push it. I knew that if I had surgery, because I would have to go on short-term disability, I would not be able to make the contribution that I normally made to my church. All of this was going through my head. You know why? Because Jerrica was not first.
You were almost asking, how much longer can I not prioritize myself
before I become paralyzed?
Right.
And you know, and I know that if I had become paralyzed, that would have been an entirely different life for me. And it surely would not have been worth it for putting everyone else first.
Yes. And I love what you said about the story, kind of like the story behind the story. It's almost as if we have our stories, which are the things that happen to us. Needing brain surgery, getting burnt out in our businesses because we're not taking care of ourselves, or whatever it happens, things that happen. It sounds like kind of underneath the story, like kind of excavating that, is what are the values underneath? So what are the values that story represents? And then I imagine for a lot of us, we can pinpoint multiple stories in our lives that all reflect those same values, or us not prioritizing those particular values in our lives. And once we start seeing the repetition of that, we can say, oh, that's what I need to be working on. And it could also be, that could be the message now that I can share with audiences because I've had this experience, I've been through it. And so now I can take this personal experience and universalize it for the people who need to hear this as well.
Mm-hmm. Because after brain surgery, I healed and I went right back to taking care of everybody else. Right back. And my health, it seems to be that my health is definitely what has had to get my attention in these latter years. And so I went right back to everyone else being the priority. And the next thing you know, my health is knocking on my door again, saying, hey, you're not the priority. You're not. But I didn't realize it then. So what happens? I start falling asleep while I'm driving. And I'm not sleeping at night. And if I did happen to doze off at night, I'm waking up in panic attacks. That my health is saying, hey, this is 911 again. Like, no, we don't need brain. And I remember being like, man, I had brain surgery. Like, what more do you want from me? Literally, I don't know who I was talking to, but I was like, I've done the ultimate. I've had brain surgery. Like, why else is what now? But my health was getting, so by that time, I had already left my duties and responsibilities with my church because I was on the leadership team, which is when we met. And so now I'm looking at an even more, if you will, giant decision of leaving my job. One of the hardest things that I've ever had to do, in addition to leaving my church, was leaving my job. Like, this was my livelihood. And how is this going to, I don't know how this is going to work out. But what I know is that if I keep going the way that I am, I'm going to kill myself or someone else or both. And that's no good. So here I was at the moment of reckoning again with not prioritizing myself, because I will tell you that the day I finished my last day of work, I slept, and I have slept fine since.
Wow. That's really powerful.
And I remember saying, like, I can't worry about how, and that's why my LinkedIn profile says I help pharmacists figure out the how, because oftentimes I used to sit and go, well, I would like to do this and I'd like to do that, but I just don't know how. So then I would go, okay, I'd resign to be all right and just keep going and be grateful, because that's what I'd say. Well, you're just not being grateful. No, I was not prioritizing myself. And now my days consist of me being the priority. And I coach many women on being the priority in their day, even if they have to get up before the family, even, whatever we have to do, because if you don't pour into you, no one else will.
Yeah, that's so true. Jerrica, I was looking back through the notes from when we worked together in October 2018. So this is a year after the first time. And I had this note in here that said, this is actually from August 2018. It said that I had recommended to you that you read the book, The Big Leap.
Yes.
By Dr. Gay Hendricks. And actually, didn't you? And he was at a conference that you attended by coincidence at the same time.
Yep.
And I wrote down this. So you read it. We came back and we did our session together. And you said that you had an aha moment about health issues cropping up when we're not working in our zone of genius.
Mm-hmm. Because, and somehow it's interesting, you and someone else who doesn't know you recommended that book to me within about a week to 2 week span of each other. And I remember I probably was marveling, like, really? These people don't know each other. And they keep saying, read this book. And you're right. He was speaking at a conference that I attended, the first trip that I took when I left my job. Gay Hendricks was speaking that Friday night at the conference. So I did get to see him speak in person. And I remember getting on a plane, and I don't remember where I was traveling to, but I remember I got the book and I was getting on a plane, probably one of my last trips for work. And I read probably about the first 20, 25 pages of that book, if that far. But when he got to the point and he talked about having nebulous health issues, there was the example that he gave about a man who had who lost his life because he had a heart attack, and how that just those nagging nebulous health issues, because I had been to the doctor saying, why am I falling asleep while I'm driving? And he had said, you don't have narcolepsy, because that was, what I thought. He was like, you don't have narcolepsy. I'm not sure what the problem is. Like, nobody could really say what this was. And I remember being on the airplane, and when I read that example, I closed the book and was like, that's it. I don't need any other confirmation. So I've never read the entire book.
I love that.
I got what I needed in that moment. I was like, this is why I was supposed to read it, because I did not want to let these nebulous health issues, mine, like I said, I'd be going 70 miles an hour on the highway and falling asleep. Dangerous. So I remember when I read that, saying, all right, that's it. I don't know how this is all going to work out, but what I know is I've got to move forward. And the thing that I can tell you, because I remember that last day of working, and here we are almost 2 years later, I remember thinking, I don't know how this is going to work out, but I sit here today telling you it has. It has. It has. I've had some rough moments. I've had some exhilarating moments. I don't know if you've seen my picture petting the elephant in Thailand last year, but I've had some exhilarating moments, but they all have net out to be, it all works out. And I have this phrase that I use with my coaching clients, because a lot of the things that we're afraid of really don't even exist except here in our minds. And I tell them there are no monsters under the bed.
And what do they say back?
They go, you're right. The things like when you take whatever it is that we're afraid of, I'm afraid of what people will think. And so I go, really? Okay. So then I'm afraid, I don't know if I'll be successful. And so when you really start to unpack that, when I give them references to nature, and I say, because we all can relate to animals and nature, I say, have you ever seen a squirrel sitting on the side of the road going, oh my gosh, there are not enough nuts. What am I going to do? Never. They scurry about. That's the problem. Well, we're the problem because we've been taking over their habitation, but they scurry about and they do what they need to do. But I have never seen one say, oh my God, I failed. I did not collect 200 nuts today, and I only got 50. I have failed. Like, the stuff that we worry about is, unfortunately, because we have the brain power to do so, and we create that stuff.
And they're probably not comparing themselves to the squirrel in the nest next door who got 100 nuts and they only got 50, because guess what? They're not counting the other squirrel's nuts, and we shouldn't be either.
Right. And the thing that you're like, no squirrel says, I'm not going to run across that street. Actually, like I said, they unfortunately, they meet their demise a lot of times that way. But no squirrel says, I'm not going to run across that street because I'm just not sure if I can do it. I might fail. No, they go for it. And we create this, what will people think? What will happen? Oh my God, I might fail. And I go, there are no monsters under the bed. If you think about little kids, there's that monster under the bed, and I don't want to face it. I don't want to look at it. But when we lean over the bed and we pull up the covers and we look under it, there are no monsters under the bed, and it really is all right.
Yes. And Jerrica, I know you took the big leap in leaving the job that you did 2 years ago, and you had a very sensible exit strategy. Like you mentioned earlier, you didn't just say like, oh, I'm going to quit tomorrow and do all that. So, which is good. So let us wrap up by leaving the listeners with some things that they can do if they are struggling to find their voice, if they're struggling to figure out, so they know they've had some events or experiences in their life. It could be something that was, very traumatic or something that was big. It could be that they've just had some small things that have gone on throughout their life, and they're in this stage now where they're in their business and they know that there's something more for them in their business. They know they want to have a bigger impact. They know that they want personally more fulfillment and more meaning in what they're doing within their business. What are some things that could help them to take those steps to identify what that could be for them?
So one of the things that I suggest, Carol, and I would suggest this whether you're having struggles or whether you're soaring, is you need a coach. You need to hire someone that will hold you accountable, that will show you what you don't know, that will help you grow to the place that you're growing to. And that might be, depending on what the need is, it may be more than one coach at a time, but I would say hire a coach. I think something happens when we become adults. And so we feel like we have to have it all together and we have to know, and I can't dare ask for help. But I believe that to find the answers that we need, we are either one, going to have them ourselves, or two, we're going to know someone who knows the answer, or we're going to know someone who knows someone that can help us get the answers. And I say that it is very, very important to have a coach in your life. I decided a long while ago that I will always have a coach as long as I'm in a professional arena and building and growing my business. I will have a coach because I want to go further, faster, and I believe that's the way to do it. Number two, a coach is different from a counselor. If there are remnants or issues that continue to come up as a result of past traumas, and trauma is not always what we necessarily think of, like big things that are abuse or things like that. Trauma can be microaggressions, if you will. Whatever the trauma is, I say seek support and seek help for resolving that, because what we refuse to face will continue to rear its head in our lives over and over again. And so when you were asking me about prioritizing myself, and I was like, what? I had brain surgery. I'm done. No, it reared its head again with my health. It's reared its head in other circumstances that I've had in my life because I hadn't begun addressing it. So if there's remnant trauma or, conditions or circumstances as a result of trauma, definitely make that a priority. I would suggest a counselor and a coach, if you will, because they do two different things.
I could not agree with you more, Jerrica, on that. And I will say that having a coach, I know that every time I've had a coach for myself in my business, that it helps me get out of my own way, because it helps me get out of my own head, because, things will circle around and circle around and circle around. And then what I have found what's so helpful with coaching is that it's a sounding board of like literally you saying things out loud to someone else has a way of providing clarity and that accountability piece as well. Like, oh, well, Carol, like you said, this is what you want to do. Well, let's talk about, is that really what you want to do? And if it is, then when is that going to happen?
Right. I think that a coach helps because they can see where you want to go and they can help you make that a reality and get there, versus we might get lost along the way. We may be distracted. We are our worst enemies, if you will, in that we can get in our own way sometimes. And, just the moment when I'm about to get in my own way. It's like sometimes I look at my phone and I wonder if my coach has like some kind of radar or something.
She's psychic.
She will text or call. And I'm like, how did she know?
That's amazing.
Because we've worked together for so long, she knows my propensities.
Yes.
She knows what makes me tick. She knows what, drains me. And so she can tell, and she will reach out in those moments where I'm like, I'll do this later.
Yes. No, it's so true. So true.
I'll get a text and it'll say, okay, what's that looking like now? And I'm like, doggone it.
I have a mastermind group here, Speaking Your Brand, for our past clients. And I have known them now for so long, some of them for 1.5 years, 2 years, at least 9 months or so. And they'll be in a hot seat and they'll start going off down a road. And I'll say something like, okay, like, I know you really well. And so I know that you're going down this road. Let's bring it back here because I know this, X, Y, and Z. And that's another benefit of having a longer term relationship with someone like a coach, because like you said, they get to understand you, your personality, what you tend to do, and they can recognize it really quickly and get you back on track.
Yes.
And I can imagine, Jerrica, you do that for the women that you coach.
Yes. I can tell when if there's silence. Because I know each individual, I can say, okay, silence with this person means this. Silence with another person means I'm fearful, I'm afraid, I don't want to do it. Whereas someone else, their silence means I've just got my head down and I'm busy working. So yes, you do learn your clients and you know what their tendencies are towards their work or building their business.
Jerrica, where can listeners find out more about you? And if they're a women pharmacist, if they need a coach, where can they find you?
I am on Facebook and LinkedIn and Instagram. And my personal website is drjerricadodd.com. So it's DR for Dr. Jerrica, Jerrica, Dodd, DODD.com, drjerricadodd.com. And I hang out on social media quite a bit. So I'm usually there and would love to connect with anyone who hears this podcast today.
Well, thank you, Jerrica. And I'll make sure to include links in the show notes so people can click from there and find you. And it has been a joy knowing you for the past almost 3 years. I'm so glad that we connected. And thank you so much for taking the time to come on the podcast today.
Thank you for having me. It was my pleasure.
Thanks again to Jerrica for coming on the podcast. She mentioned at the end about the benefits of hiring a coach. If you are a women pharmacist, I cannot recommend Jerrica enough. So definitely check her out, go to her website and go to her LinkedIn and connect with her there. And if you are looking for a coach, if you need help with your messaging, with finding your voice, with using your voice, with your signature talk, we are still working with lots of clients who are doing virtual speaking engagements. So they're doing webinars to drive business to their offers and their programs. They're also getting paid to do virtual workshops and virtual training. So there is definitely a lot of speaking still going on out there, even if it is all virtual right now. And we can help you create presentations that drive ROI for your business. You can check out our coaching programs, and I invite you to schedule a free consultation call with us. Just go to speakingyourbrand.com. Under the Work With Us tab, you'll find our Create Your Signature Talk coaching. And then you can also go to the Contact tab to schedule that consultation call with us. I look forward to talking with you. Until next time, thanks for listening.